Welcome back, everyone, on another edition of Reporting Norms. I have Rodrigo Gomez. I'd like to go ahead and take a moment to introduce you to him. And before I do that, on the reporting norms, as you know, we focus on financial reporting, internal controls, and anything related to business. So if you find this content useful or helpful, please feel free to like and subscribe. So today on the reporting norms, I have Rodrigo Gomez here with me. He is a person that sits at the intersection of engineering excellence, strategic oversight, internal audit, and infrastructure innovation. Rodrigo holds a master's in civil engineering degree from the Technical University of Madrid with a specialization in hydraulics and renewable energy. His career began with a focus on client needs and technical precision, two traits that have guided him across continents and high-stakes projects. From 2012 to 2016, he led proposals and bid coordination for global infrastructure firm Isolux Corson, based in Madrid. Rodrigo oversaw major builds such as airports, hospitals, heavy civil programs spanning the U.S., Europe, Asia, and Africa. And then in 2017, he joined Ferrovial Construction in Texas, helping close out the North Tarrant Express in Tarrant County 35 West segment project. This project addressed congestion and improved mobility in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. His role expanded further in 2020 as contract and controls lead for the $800 million segments, where he guided planning, schedule analysis, and financial closings. Since 2022, Rodrigo has led internal audit for OHLA Group, OHLA Group in North America. Based in Miami, he crafts annual audit plans and oversees cross-functional reviews, technical, financial, operational, and compliance across major infrastructure portfolios. Rodrigo is a certified project management professional, OSHA 30-hour construction trained, and holds a credential in generative AI from the Project Management Institute. He's an engineer, he's a strategist, mentor, auditor, and systems thinker who brings clarity to chaos, and he's here to share his playbook and insights with us. So welcome to the show, Rodrigo. Thanks for being here with us.
Thank you so much, Norm, for the introduction and for the invitation, to participate in your podcast.
Absolutely, Rodrigo. I've got a few questions that I thought we could kind of get into, but I thought what made your background interesting is that you have technical backgrounds in hydraulics and civil engineering, but you also lead internal audit functions within the company OHLA that you're currently with. So maybe we can start off by asking where you have had hands-on experience with civil engineering into governance as well as audit. Tell us a little bit about the moment where you basically convinced yourself that have this engineering mindset and I could strengthen internal controls over these major infrastructure projects. So maybe you can just kind of start there.
Yeah. So I think it was more during my previous experience in North Texas at the North Tarrant Express projects, where I was given the opportunity to move from the field, supervising construction, project controls, cost control, contracts. So I realized that the engineering mindset that I had to always look for the root cause of the issues, but combined with this financial knowledge that I started gaining, and from my first experience during bid and proposals, contracts, and all that stuff, I realized I was good at it. I really enjoy it, like setting processes, checking for deviations, for continuous improvements, and I realized, yeah, I think I can do that. I really like processes, controls, governance.
I see. Now you actually head or you lead internal audit for OHLA in North America. Maybe we could just take a moment and describe OHLA as a company. Tell us a little bit about the company itself.
Well, OHLA is an international group. It's civil construction, vertical construction, concessions, also industrial projects. It's one of the largest companies from Spain, and it's international companies based, in Spain, but works around Europe. Projects in countries like Sweden, Czech Republic, also in Latin America, Chile, Colombia, Peru, and here in the US. In the US, it's approximately 45% of the whole business. So it's
Okay.
a big piece of the business for the group.
Yeah, so almost 50% of OLA's business right here in North America that you oversee from an internal audit standpoint. So you also establish the annual plan that balances risk, business practices, and actually deploy, audit efforts. Tell us a little bit about how you apply internal audit, your internal audit role in these projects that you just mentioned, but primarily in North America, correct?
Yeah. So at the end of the year, we'll always prepare the annual the annual plan for the following year. So I prepared this plan in close coordination with corporate director of internal audit that is based in Madrid, Spain. That is the director for the whole group. So we go together and review like what are the main risks that the company is facing, where are the areas that we have identified for opportunity to improve. So we put together, a list of projects that cover all the different regions of the business here in the US, because the company in the US is present in South Florida, but it's also, working in New York, in Boston, Chicago, California, Southern California. So yeah, it's a little bit spread across the. So we also have limited hours because we have a good team of auditors, but it would be uh, you know larger. But so we put together this annual plan covering 5 to 6 projects and also key business units and cross audits to cover specific controls or specific processes that we think are needed.
So in these large civil engineering projects, walk us through like a typical audit that you or your team might be involved in recently. And feel free to choose a project that where you had some field work and you may have identified some matters that needed to be reported upon. Maybe just kind of at a very high level, describe what the audit process looks like for a
Yeah,
civil
so
engineering
we
project.
always prepare audit plan for the project. Based on this audit plan, we have a list of requests, like documentation that we request to the project. We as a company have like internal software that all the projects use. So there's a lot of information already uploaded there. So that's very helpful for us because we have access to a lot of information in advance. So we can start drafting a report before going there in person. So that's goal is to assess risk, and also assess the compliance, with internal control, internal norms, and in this type of projects, construction is a very risky industry. There's a lot of things out of your control. Sometimes we review the schedule, we review the budget, pending work, pending units, no, pending quantities and unit prices, pending procurement, which procurement is also a risk item. You can gain or lose money there. We also review the claims, the list of if there's any claim or any potential claim with the owner, all the changes so far, the change orders or the potential change orders log. So it's a comprehensive analysis of the status of the project.
Right, right. With such a large project and in terms of OLA's involvement, when you say that you are requesting information about the project, are you asking that information of internal OLA people, or are they the general contractor or sort of the project managers? Who actually is giving you this documentation?
Yeah, no, we are usually the general contractor in the project,
Okay.
working for a public owner or public agency most of the times. We don't usually have private owners, only in the vertical construction business for some apartments, buildings, and facilities. But with the with the heavy civil construction business is usually a public entity. Okay. And
Okay.
we are usually the general contractor. So we usually reach out to the regional EVP. Okay. We reach out to him and we always notify officially that we are going to audit the project in his region, his or her region, and we request a point of contact. So this point of contact is usually the project manager of the project, and it's an OHLA employee.
Employee. Okay. So when you tell them that, hey, I'm going to be coming around and kind of kicking the tires, taking a look around, tell me how those discussions work, and
Yeah,
you know,
it's
it's generally pretty smooth.
yeah, it's usually and generally pretty smooth. They see it as also as an opportunity to learn new things or see if they can improve in internal controls. And so I think that's good. And that's one of the goals of internal audit, no? To add value.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, they're usually very, very helpful. They provide the documentation that is not uploaded or available in this internal software that we all use. And yeah, and usually the first day that we arrive to the project, we have a initial interview with them just to gain like a better understanding of the overall project, the overall scope of work. And after that, we usually visit the site, check the progress, the locations where the main issues or ongoing construction at the moment is active. And after that, we start going through specific questions, regarding the schedule, the cost reports, payment application with the owner, claims, notice of delay, wherever.
I see. You mentioned two things. One is internal controls and then procurement. Let's start off with internal controls. So when I think about internal controls, I think about segregation of duties, oversight, review, sign-offs, etc. Are those the types of, basic internal controls that you're looking at, or are they more specific to construction projects?
Those are a portion of them. We always check, the internal regulations because we, as an international group, we have this list of internal regulations applying to different process and different scopes. One is the budgeting, another one is procurement, another one is communications, another one is expenses, how you manage your expenses, like personal expenses, vehicle, fleet. There's a lot of different things. So we go through them and check that the project is applying those. Those are in place. And then when we say internal controls, we also look a lot at how the cost control is being performed, different steps, if it's is being performed properly. Also how the internal meetings, if they have, this daily meeting, safety, quality is very important in infrastructure projects. We always check that too. So it's a list of a lot of different things.
Sounds like a pretty comprehensive list. I would imagine that at the outset of a major project that you have a very detailed plan that covers the timing, the cost, and compliance, just a myriad of different things. But here on the reporting norms, we like to try to focus on the money part, the dollars. So I would think from a budget standpoint, is there a dedicated budget manager, like FP&A person who is dedicated to that project, or is that something that is done more at the corporate level?
It depends more on the size of the project.
Okay.
So for smaller projects, that scope is done on the regional office, by the
Okay.
team of finance and accounting professionals. But then there are larger projects, and most of the time when these projects are joint ventures, they work as a independent entity. It's like a new company, these joint ventures. So these joint ventures, usually they have their own teams of accountants, and there's a CFO or a project controller in those projects. So it's more, depends on the size, no? And the budget amount of the project.
Okay, that makes sense. What about the procurement side? Is that central, or is that also, kind of, sort of case by case as well, in terms of who manages the purchasing of all the raw materials to actually build, an infrastructure project?
Yeah, so that's more on the project itself, managed by the project manager and his or her team. Sometimes if the project is large, there's a dedicated procurement team in the project. But then we have like a procurement specialist as a supporting in the regions. The good thing is that this software that I mentioned, that all the projects have all the information uploaded there. We also have a specific module in this software that is a procurement module. So all the procurement process are there. So it's pretty straightforward, and we have all the flow charts of approval with notes and comments. So I think the company is doing a pretty good job there.
I see. You mentioned the software earlier. It sounds like an ERP system that kind of looks at the project as a whole. Can you just describe the software a little bit more? Is it a
The thing is
proprietary
that
software, or
this
is it?
is an ERP, but it's a very customized and is developed in house. So we
Okay,
have I say a good IT team in the company, and I was not in the company back there, but they made the decision of developing their own system, and it has its strengths and weaknesses. There's like in the procurement, it's a very very good mm, module.
I see. You have a certification or background in a credential in generative AI and project management. Is there current discussions within the company about how Gen AI could be applied within the software system that you talked about, in terms of gaining insight on certain KPIs or trends, or even predictive modeling? Anything like that going on?
Yeah, there's discussions about AI, of course. It's
It's
something
top
that
of mind.
you have to take into account and start
Sure.
learning. But at this moment, we haven't seen anything like implemented yet. We work with Microsoft, and we have the Copilot. We can use it in some of the Microsoft tools, but apart of that, nothing more. I know
Okay.
there's discussions, and my point of view is that this is very interesting. When you have a lot of data to analyze trends, spot anomalies, to draft, you know, reports at the beginning, you make the templates. I think okay, there's plenty of of things to understand and know about in artificial intelligence. There's this confidentiality thing yet, and also, well, the critical thinking and the how to know the different stakeholders and that you're auditing. That's still on the management and the personal side, but I think it can be a very supportive tool.
Okay. Yeah. When you audit a large project, major infrastructure project that's in process, have you observed any common themes, or if not, maybe you might have an example of some gap that you've experienced, seen, where this is the original plan, but it's kind of progressing in this manner that's somewhat deviating from the original plan, and what you've seen and how you've rectified that. Can you have an example of that?
Yeah, so one of the largest projects in infrastructure are usually design build projects. In these design build projects, there's a lot of risk on the contractor side because it's a lump sum. So you take the risk on the design and all the quantities. It's the type of project that you have the most room for opportunity, but at the same time, the most risk. So in those projects, you have to have a very good coordination between the design team and the construction team to coordinate all these changes in design, that those are correctly, reflected into the quantities and the pricings to update your budget. Okay, so quantity control is one of the main and most important activities in design build projects. And I would say that some of the gaps that you sometimes see is a weak cost structure. You see that there was not a plan, well, a structured plan at the beginning of the project of knowing how the budget would evolve, how the design changes would evolve. So you see that this structure has changed a lot from the beginning of the project. So a lot of cost deviations get lost in translation, get lost because there's been so many changes in cost codes that you don't really see the evolution, no? You cannot analyze the evolution of the budget, no? And keep a good tracking. Also for lessons learned, no? These projects are very good and then implement those lessons learned in the following projects. So a very sound and robust cost control structure is very important in this type of projects. Then another gap is that I usually see is they use a lot of lump sum cost codes. Lump sum is like you don't really have quantities in those cost codes, so you cannot track quantities. It's based on cost, so you only track cost. So it's very difficult to analyze root causes in those cost codes. If you start seeing that you're gonna be short on budget, so I always recommend to avoid the use of a lot of lump sum cost codes, only for miscellaneous activities that are not high in budget, that you can put all together in a single cost code and call it miscellaneous activities, but it's a small thing. I see that a lot of times they use it for subcontractors because the subcontractor sometimes is a lump sum, but although it's a lump sum contract with the sub, it's good to do like a breakdown on main activities with their unit quantities, cubic yard, linear foot,
Okay.
the different work units. And then I would say that the last or the third biggest gap that I see is the lack of a good risk and opportunity matrix. I think in these large projects that there are a lot of risk, a lot of stakeholders. It's usually a right of way acquisition process, a big utility conflicts like water, gas, electrical, a lot of players, no, that can impact your project. So having since the beginning, since bid phase, a good risk and opportunity matrix that then when construction starts, you keep maintaining, like closing risk and opportunities and open new ones, I think is very important to have in this type of projects. You can also, allocate responsibilities within your team, like, hey, this associate project manager is going to be in charge of this risk and opportunities. So there's accountability there. Then you can have like a mitigation plan, also a percentage of, estimation of if it's going to happen or not. And also that tool can be a very good supporting document for your budget updates. Construction companies, you usually update your budget quarterly or every 3 months, every 3-4 months, like
Sure.
3 times a year. So this risk and opportunity matrix is a very useful tool for your budget scenarios. Work with a possible scenario, and then you have a pessimistic and optimistic scenario based on
Sure.
your risk and opportunities. So I think
Having a range.
it's pretty important.
Would one of the risks or opportunities be what you just mentioned a moment ago, which is lump sum budgeting or lump sum estimations? It sounds like a lump sum value that's incorporated into the budget is not kind of built from a bottoms up standpoint, but more a higher level estimate. So it sounds like a best practice would not be to do lump sum, but try to go as detailed as possible, but that may not be practical. So what do you say about that?
Yeah, no, most of these lump sum, they should have the breakdown. So to get to that lump sum amount, you need a breakdown, but then you have to think and with a strategic mind to like break it down till it's a manageable structure, because you cannot have like millions of cost codes, because if not, you're going to get lost too. You're going to lose a lot of time analyzing millions of cost codes. So you have to find like the midpoint,
Mm-hmm.
having a structure that you can assess well the cost deviations. That is a manageable list of cost codes that are not too many, that is going to take you, a lot of time to do a proper analysis.
There's always that cost benefit, right? You talked about earlier about change orders, and from my understanding and experience with construction projects, that's oftentimes inevitable, especially as you begin the project. Sometimes things don't quite play out the way that you had originally anticipated. Tell me about the change order process and the governance around that at a high level. How does that work within OLA?
Well, there are two different, most of the time, two different types of change orders. No, the one that you propose to the owner, and the owner reviews and approves, and the other one is the one that is proposed by the owner because they want to increase the scope of work in the project, a scope that wasn't in the original bid. So you give pricing, and the project gets updated, and the scope is increased. The process is the same, is very similar, but those are, the most common options. No? So when I was working in North Texas in Fort Worth with Ferrovial, I was in charge as project control manager and contract manager of drafting change orders to the owner. So we identify issues in the project that were not in the original bid. So going through the contract, there's always clauses that allow you to claim the owner and request a change order. So you follow the process, and it's like doing like a small little bit, because you define the scope of work, put quantities, put unit prices, and it's also very important to include the list of clauses, like what is included and what is not included in the price. That's very, very important. There's no gray area there. And then you start this negotiation with the owner. You provide a first draft, and at the end, you get the change order approved, and then you incorporate that new scope to the pay application with the owner, and also to your internal cost control structure with new cost codes.
Do you find that there are more OLA initiated change orders or customer or owner initiated change orders, or it kind of just depends?
Usually there's more on the contractor. The contractor usually identifies issues in the project. Sometimes these are also time extension requests because the project was impacted and that was outside the control of the contractor. So you also do like a time impact analysis and provide all the supporting information to the owner for them to analyze, and they approve. They give you extra days. Then after you get the extra dates, or depending if it's a design to build project, most of the times it's all together. You also request for additional overhead, or if your overhead was impacted by this time extension. And so, yeah.
I would imagine weather would be one potential thing that's out of your control.
Yeah, whether design bid bill or hard bids, usually in the schedule they have some allowances for weather days, and also depending on the region that you're working. For example, in Chicago, I think in Boston, I don't know if in New York, I think so, there's winter breaks. Because of the winter, you cannot do concrete works or asphalt works. So there's usually some months over there that you cannot do work. But in design build projects, you have all the risk. So you agree to a contractual deadline, and this type of contracts, they usually include the force majeure clause. So if it's in reality something outside your control that was impossible to take into account, they can give you some extension. But if not, it's at risk. You know that it rains a lot in that area, you have to take into account that in your proposal to the owner.
Makes sense. In the project in Tarrant County in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, it appeared as though the construction was done while traffic was still moving.
Yeah.
So that seems like it's very inherently dangerous. And so who bears the risk of injuries in those cases, or does it kind of depend on the project? But it seems inherently very dangerous to be working with cars flying by it.
Yeah, it's very complex. And
yeah,
there's also in this large infrastructure project, there's a lot of insurance that you need to get. There's builder's risk, professional liability risk. After that, there's an umbrella to cover additional risk. So there's a lot of insurance because, it's a risky business. But yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
during this project, we have to do a lot of traffic shifts. You have to protect all the areas with temporary concrete barrier. You have to close at night some of the lanes to be able to work, always
yeah,
with attenuator tracks to protect all the workers, all the labor. So there's a lot of planning,
yeah.
coordination, communication to the public in advance so they know that in a week that portion of the highway is gonna get closed. So it's a complex operation. This.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot there. Your role within OHLA and something that I mentioned in the intro, where you act as a mentor to a lot of your staff in the internal audit department and perhaps other groups as well. And Marquee Magazine recognized you at Who's Who in 2025. And so maybe you could describe your own leadership style for young engineers who are doing what you are doing currently, which includes internal audit. What are some of the things that you would tell them to focus on and keep in mind at this point in time of their?
Yeah, so that's a thing like training junior engineers. That's something that I started doing in the North Taran Express project. I put together with cost control training program for younger engineers. And now in my current role at OHLA, I'm the only civil engineer in the department. So my colleagues and the rest of team members are learning a lot of the technical point of view, assess risk in projects. They're more focused on finance and accounting and less on technical things. So I train them on the things to look from a civil engineer point of view in these projects. And to young civil engineers, piece of advice that I would give is always ask questions, to get to the root cause of things, understand the scope of work and why they are happening. Second thing that I would say to them is to improve or look to improve your organizational skills and be consistent. I think consistency builds trust. And the third is to be polite, have a good communication skills to request things and buy gain in from the stakeholders. That's very important in internal audit because you can have amazing recommendations and very critical recommendation and observations, but if you don't convey them in a proper way, you're not gonna get the buy-in from the stakeholders. So I think
Yeah.
those three things are important.
Yeah, makes sense. Something that you had mentioned when we spoke initially was being curious, asking why. What is the root cause of the problem? Do you apply that in your own work as well as convey that to your underlings? And how does that work for you?
Yeah, of course. I think that's you first need to understand what you're looking at. And once you understand it, everything is easier. So that happens also with the processes. You need to understand why this process is in place and the outcomes, no, that you are willing to get. So yeah, I apply that constantly. I apply that during my time in the construction field, during my time with project controls and contracts, and now in internal audit.
Okay, that makes total sense. I agree with that, and I subscribe to that need to be curious.
Yeah.
We're getting
No,
yeah. Go ahead.
and normal. Nowadays, I think there's much more access to everything, to information, to training, to now you have a artificial intelligence tool that can give you some guidelines that then you can explore or know the things that you don't usually think of. So I think it's very important to stay curious and learn new things on a daily basis.
Yes. So we're getting close to the end of our time, Rodrigo. But before I ask you the last question that I have for you, I just wanted to remind our listeners that if you find Rodrigo's insights and inputs interesting, please do like and subscribe to this channel. So, Rodrigo, my last question is one where you have had quite a bit of international experience. You're originally from Madrid. You've been living in the United States for several years now. You've worked on projects worldwide. Can you just talk a little bit about how working in different countries compares to working in the U.S. on these projects, not only building projects, but also from an internal audit standpoint?
Yeah, well, I've worked, in projects and with professionals from Europe, from Africa, from India, from the US. So, and one thing that I think that is pretty important is to adapt your style. Always listen first. Try to first understand a little bit the differences between cultures and how they approach communication and problem solving too. And once you gain that first understanding, then try to adapt your style. Always align with the work that you need to do and the controls and everything. But it's always good to adapt. And an example is, for example, working in Spain is very different to working in the US. The communication style is a little bit different. In Spain, it's like more direct. In the US, it's more politically correct. In Spain, it's like more rough, I think. Then contractually, in Spain, contracts are more basic because they're based on like other baselines or other general contracts. So they're very easy with a little bit of adaptation to the specific project. While here in the US, contracts are very lengthy, very complex. There's this litigation and claim processes, all these liquidated damages. There's a lot of legal teams involved. So that's part of the culture that is different between Spain and the US. I think it's good, no, to learn from different cultures and see, because you get things, no, from them.
So I think we've come to the end of our time, but what I feel is I just need to say that mi español es muy malo, pero I feel I can use the tú form instead of the usted form. I hope that you could agree with that.
No, tu español es okay.
It's okay. Okay. Muchas gracias. Well, Rodrigo, it was a pleasure having you on the show and having you share your insights on major infrastructure construction projects and how internal audit actually plays into that, especially with your unique background of having both civil engineering and internal audit as well as financial acumen. Thank you very much for your time, Rodrigo.
Yeah, thank you so much, Norm, and thank you.
Absolutely. And for our audience, until next time, stay transparent.